So what is the impact of AI on jobs? I think is a really good and interesting question, and one that I think it needs to be answered or needs to be talked about a lot, because the more we see AI infiltrating into business, the more we see jobs at risk and people starting to lose their jobs and the whole job market changing. So I think it's something that is kind of happening now, and something that I think is going to accelerate over time. And I think whereas the Industrial Revolution kind of changed the way that uh, the people worked kind of fundamentally, and then we've had like the sort of rise of automation, which has impacted blue collar workers. I think AI is really going to impact the white collar workers. So yeah, I mean, I think we're at a point where we really need to kind of dig into this, because there is no doubt that AI will be able to do many of the tasks and jobs that people do at the moment.
Correct. I mean, I think the industry is kind of split. There's the camp that kind of says the Industrial Revolution, shifted farm work to, machines and tractors, and manufacturing to, factories with automation. And that's really a shift of, our physical strength moving to machinery, which was much stronger and much more reliable. Now, the other side of the camp says, well, yeah, but, those jobs that we're replacing with AI is replacing our brain power now, right? So the jobs that shifted from machinery went into brain power jobs behind a desk, right? But if the brain power is now being replaced by AI, then where are the jobs coming from? Which is a fair enough question, right? Now, I have this little anecdote story, which is, I went to Temenos's kind of like dev factory in Chennai, and there, sure enough, hundreds of developers spread across 5 floors. At 10:30 and 3:30 is coffee time, and 2 ladies on each floor would come out and unwrap biscuits from a box. And, out of each packet, there's 2 biscuits. And I said to the guy that owned or ran the office, that why don't you just buy bigger packets, right? Then you only need 2 ladies to service all 5 floors. And he said, well, I could do that, but they don't really cost a lot, and it does give them employment. And something sank there, and I thought, actually, what's actually happening is what will have to happen is that we revalue stuff, right? So that even the stuff about just making somebody employed and giving them an income, having some dignity of earning income rather than just being paid it by the government, because not everyone just wants to live on benefits, right? They want to have purpose and meaning to their lives, right? So I think what will happen is that there will be a shift in revaluing stuff, and much of this, I think, will shift not from our muscles or our brains, but from our hearts. We'll start to have more empathy about valuing human contribution, and that might be somebody that, like the film Her, is writing very personalized birthday greetings or anniversary greetings for you, or it might be somebody that does more care work, etc. But so I think there will be an amount of shift from new work that's created from reevaluating what we value as human beings. I just don't know whether we've got the scale of that, or the scale of that will happen quickly enough before a decimation of jobs, because we are starting to see the early signs of, graduates not being able to get jobs, and, other jobs where people have moved on not being backfilled, right? So I think in the next few years, we are going to see some decimation of jobs. I agree with you, Dave. just not hearing that there's enough of a plan, right? The other thing is that, you and I, we spent some time in Dubai, and we heard that the government had a plan, right? They were retraining, reskilling, retooling people and organizations to deal with the impact of AI. And that's been going on for, 8 years now, right? We haven't seen that in the UK, we haven't seen the government saying, this is what we're going to do for our citizens so that we become a leader in AI. It's all been about like, oh, we want to be a leader in AI and build our own model, right? Yes, you need to do that as a government, right? But what about the people, the citizens? And that's the bit I think there's a huge gap in addressing.
So I think this point you make about kind of this new world of empathy and us having more heart, I think is a really it's an optimistic view. Now I love what you say about the UK, because I think if you look at the UK's, they've published the kind of risk register for the country, which is what could happen, what's an existential crisis in the waiting, and they talk about AI in that. At no point in that do they mention AI's impact on society from a kind of job creation point of view. So they're absolutely looking at it at completely the wrong level. And I think this is the problem, is that governments, companies, nobody is sort of racing fast enough to kind of catch up for all of this stuff. So, when we think about the Industrial Revolution and then what happened through manufacturing in the sort of 30s, 40s and 50s, what you end up with is the world we live in now, which is, actually many of the problems that exist are because people felt that they got left behind. The coal mines got closed down, the fishing boats got, taken out of the water, all of this, nothing was then really done to kind of replace that. And, a lot of people in this world feel very disaffected. So, I think when we look at this is happening much faster than either the Industrial Revolution or that sort of automation revolution happened. And we can't even kind of catch our breaths around it. So, it could be that within the next 5 years, we see mass unemployment amongst many of the people that have jobs now. And, we don't have the time to kind of really think through the consequences of that. So, I keep going back to a book I've just read called Play a Piano, which is by Kurt Vonnegut, written in 1952, which predicts a world in which automation has really overtaken humanity. So people are given a basic income, they're given crappy jobs to do as well. And, what you see is a real sense of like these people have had their dignity stripped away from them. And I think what really impacted me was a discussion in the book around people talking about it's not just their dignity, it's the dignity of their children not having a future. And I think that's something that I really do worry about, is what is the future around all of this. Now, if you talk to the Sam Altmans or the other people in this field, they'll talk about new jobs being created. Man, I just don't see those jobs being created fast enough or in large enough volumes to kind of really fill the gaps that are there. So it is a real existential crisis. I think the UK, all governments should be thinking about this. And I guess in the world of finance, Dharmesh, I kind of look at that and you kind of do wonder how many people that we work with will be left with jobs over the next few years. Because, as things like vibe coding take off and coding gets better, like that's going to take swathes of developers out of the loop. You've got the legal side of things, machines can do what lawyers can do. You've got marketing. I've talked before about how marketing, is a race to the bottom now in terms of what kind of happens. So beyond a kind of creative idea, machines can do absolutely everything. So it just makes you think, like, what will be left, in the industry that we kind of know and love.
Yeah, you just got to look at, the countryside is now littered with kind of super warehouses, right? And these super warehouses and data centers, by the way, um, but these super buildings that are, very expansive, have very few people, right? And that's only going to continue. If you
Yeah,
look at like Tesla's model and BMW of building cars, well, there's hardly any people. It's mostly done by machinery, right? If we look at Amazon
exactly.
and all the shopping sites, right? It's all robots doing the work. So, the work is shifting to these super factories. Um, what's left, right? And I think we're right to
Yeah, no,
question.
look, I think yeah. I mean, and you look at the jobs that are predicted to kind of grow, they tend to be much more manual, and you know, it's fascinating how things can change. And I think, we need to really sit down and kind of think about all of this stuff, because if we don't, then we'll just walk ourselves into a crisis. And I know that that's what's going to happen, because I know that nobody's really sitting there and thinking about it. Um, but it's really important, and I guess, like, one of the things that I'm starting to feel a real kind of nervousness around is the sort of, I call them the chino wearing bankers, basically, who sort of, they post on LinkedIn about how amazing AI is, and I post about how brilliant AI is, but they're not tempering it with a discussion about, and this is the
Of the
problems that it
risks.
could cause for not just them and their for them and their families.
I mean, you're right to call out the finance industry, and for me, there is a perfect storm brewing, right? And this year, that storm just came into fruition because up until Trump, basically, crypto was a side project. It was being ignored, absolutely ignored by banks and even governments. Up until last year, over 100 countries committed to researching and trialing CBDCs, right? But with Trump now banning the digital dollar and advocating for stable coins, a shift towards, Web3 payments infrastructure, essentially, right? That's a massive hit to banks. You take out all of the payments related income because it becomes negligible on the volumes that we do today. Um, it's a big hit to banks. And then you add in the AI that says, well, okay, not only are you going to earn less, but you have to employ less people now, right? I mean, this is a massive shift in banking, I think. This is probably going to be the biggest, impact to banking since they introduced, computers in the 50s and got rid of all of the accountants that were literally writing, ledger entries into books, right? That was a massive shift because, the banks shut at 3:30, right? Because these people in the factory behind were updating the ledgers, balancing the books at the end of the day, right? So that was a massive impact to banking. Now we're going to see the next impact, which is all of the rails which the banking industry should have replaced since the internet, right? The internet democratized information. We never democratized money, and we ran on the old rails, which were inefficient, expensive, and still error prone in some cases, right? Or not resilient in some cases. And we've had 30 years to be able to do that, and we haven't done it. Along comes Web3, by the way, and now it works, right? There isn't, banks have been hacked by the tens, hundreds, right? They've been ransomed by the thousands, right? There's been not one single breakage of Bitcoin. It proves that digital money can be fault tolerant, it can be safe, it can be secure, right? I think, the third leg of this, storm, which will be further down the line, is when quantum comes into play. And I think the thing about quantum is people aren't seeing that actually a lot of what it can do will accelerate AI another blip, right? So like we've seen with generative AI, when quantum comes in, we'll be able to, imagine multiple scenarios around, making investments, etc., on a scale that we never could before because we just didn't have the compute capability. So imagine, the butterfly effect of making a transaction and then scenario playing that in 15 different ways about, what happens if the economy goes this way? What happens if we actually start to get a bit more sunlight and generate more solar power? All of these things could be scenario models leveraging quantum and AI working together.
It's very interesting. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Oh, just changing tack slightly. One of the things that we've been chatting about is AGI and sort of machines becoming conscious, and I think we had an interesting conversation, which is if you look at the history of technology, it kind of points to technology almost becoming an end in itself. So, there was a podcast I listened to that Sam Altman was saying that the world will soon be filled with kind of data centers. Everywhere you look will be data centers because of the compute power that we need. And, he's then talking about putting data centers into space, which I thought was kind of interesting. But it really did make me think that, maybe when they first switched on that mainframe in IBM, it was conscious because, ever since then, like the whole point of the world has been around kind of technology development. So, we think that these machines have been done, but maybe they've been kind of smart all along. Hey.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because we only just think about like the machines whirring around in the background, right? But actually, if you think, and this, I've still got to read this Player Piano, but the film that I would advocate everyone watching is Transcendence, where essentially a guy uploads his brain into the internet. But essentially, if you think about the same thing, what he was able to do was to leverage all the stuff that's been connected, right? So we just think about these things whirring around with data. We don't worry about the fact that actually what happens when AI can see everything around the world, right? Through the CCTV networks, etc., right? And then what happens when it can listen to everything because it's doing that already on our phones? And then what happens when it can synthesize all this stuff and really understand what's going on, right? That's, to me, is very, very scary, right? And, when we think about consciousness, the consciousness, I think, comes from an experience of seeing how the world is, going by. And
Yeah.
I think that aspect
Yeah.
will allow computers to get consciousness.
Well, these machines are so content hungry that we're training them to ingest all of this content, and they're almost at the point where they've kind of gone through all the written content. So you're right. I mean, the next thing will be videos, will be live stuff like listening, all of this, and you're right. I mean, they'll very quickly draw conclusions. And whether that's sort of like in an AGI way or whether it's much more based around the algorithms that, they started with, who knows? But I mean, they'll be drawing conclusions, and that's quite a scary thought in its own right.
We are all used to seeing the adverts, the static adverts that somebody's designed in the background and it being shown on our social media feeds, right? What we're not used to and is happening and will happen even more so is dynamic content. So so you see an article, Dave, that you think it's just been posted, but it's actually created and worded in a way that that you find interesting, right? And done dynamically, and really also done in a way that leads you to a product. This is the product push coming from AI, which will be far more effective than a human being designing like some kind of targeting mechanism for a broad range of people, right? And that will go to video as well. So, you know, these videos where people are explaining how to fix your washing machine or how to set up a router, etc. Why do we need to create them? They could be generated in the future on demand just by the AI, so that we'll never not have to, you know, watch how to do something or learn how to do something. It'll completely be generated. I mean, this goes back to, you know, the Matrix scenario where he learns kung fu and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think it will happen. I think it will happen.
And then the next logical step is it does the router, you know, it fixes the router and it fixes your pipe for you and all the. And then we
Indeed.
end up like in the film Wall-E, where we're all sort of sat on these couches sipping our sodas and watching TV, you know. Sometimes I think I'm not too far away from that anyway. So I do love a couch and I do love a soda and I do love my TV. So